And it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born unto them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were fair, and they took them wives, all which they chose. There were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. It is this passage in the Bible that has left people wondering and searching for giants. And despite the fact that many people nowadays find, there's all kinds of stuff on the internet where you can find pictures of these gigantic skeletons that have been supposedly dug up, and you'll see them, and most of the time they are just these outrageously massive skeletons that are like, people that are, the size of dinosaurs and things. Okay, so where does this idea of these, 50-foot tall people come from, right? Well, there's a passage in the Bible, in the book of Numbers, where these scouts come to Moses and the Israelites, and they tell them that when they were in the land of Canaan, there were these giant people, and that they felt like grasshoppers in the eyes of these people. And this is obviously an exaggeration, and these are not the same giants that were mentioned in the Bible in Genesis. These are people who lived in the days of Moses, where they were, during the time when they were wandering in the desert for 40 years. They sent these scouts in, and they came back with these stories of these massive people. And people have clung to this idea for a long time that these people were huge like that. And just want to point out the obvious unrealistic idea that these people were, that big. When you think about people being the size of grasshoppers next to these men, they would have to be, Godzilla-sized people. And this just does not make sense, right? Another thing to point out is that it never says in the Bible that these two scouts were ever sent on another reconnaissance mission again. Okay? Probably because their intel was not very good. Also, it's important to note that in the book of Joshua, where they actually go into the land of Canaan and into Israel, the Holy Land, they don't have any mention of gigantic people that they were fighting. They don't talk about massive 50-foot tall people. That's something you would think they would write about, right? It doesn't add up with the rest of the Bible. And we shouldn't be going by the word of these two scouts for information about Genesis. Now, Genesis does talk about giants, though, and there is plenty of reason to believe that there were giants in the days of Noah, okay? Now, these weren't, the 50-foot tall people that we're talking about in, the popular, YouTube pages will show you these massive skeletons. That's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is people that are abnormally large, and walked the earth in the years of around 12,000 BC. There is evidence for giants in the Paleolithic. Now, in Berg Akos has been excavated a partial femur bone from a coal mine, and this leg bone is not very impressive to look at first, but when it's compared to a modern femur bone, it shows that it is at least 3 times larger than the human femur bone. Now, this has not been dated, and it could date back to much further than the days of Genesis, but what it represents is the possibility and the very realization that human beings have a potential to be much larger than they are now. And such giant forms did exist in the ancient past. So, what I want to talk about is the reality that human beings mixed with the Neanderthals, and when they did, it caused an age of hybrids, and the hybrid age is what we see depicted in the book of Genesis, where we have these giants that came from these two races mixing together. And when they did, the results were shocking, okay, and they would have been surprising to both groups of people. So what happened when the cro-magnons came into the land of Eden? These people saw the women, and they took of them wives of all that they chose, just like the Bible says. When they came into the land, they had the ability of flight. They used these hot air balloons and landed on hilltops and mountainous regions, and they went around and gathered up the Neanderthal women and had sex with them. And the result was something that could not have been predicted by either the Neanderthals or the cro-magnons. These people became massive, giant people. And what are we talking about as far as height goes? Well, probably somewhere in between 9 to 12 feet tall people. And they were monstrous. They had about 3 generations of these hybrid species that had no real history, that couldn't be controlled by either the Neanderthals or the cro-magnons. Mostly they were in all different forms. If you look at a cro-magnon skeleton and a Neanderthal skeleton, you can see that they were vastly different from each other, and could, when the two mixed, the result was always something different. Every birth was a new kind of creature altogether. And so you would see some of these with extra pronounced brow ridges. You would see them with some being very slender and tall, like the cro-magnons, and also with thick bones, like the Neanderthals. Basically, any combination that you can think of was going on at this time, where, some of them would be very strange to look at. Some of them would have completely different morphologies to their bone structures than either of these things, because the diversity was so high, right? And they were a blight on the land. They basically terrorized everybody that they came in contact with. And the longer this happened, the longer that they just, that it felt as though the world had been turned upside down by these giants, okay? And what these things would do is they would hunt things for sport. They would just kill tons of animals for no reason at all. They would burn fields and forests just to burn them. Most of them were cannibals and would eat Neanderthals or cro-magnons if they got them on their own. They would kill children. They would eat human children, and they would eat the children of the Neanderthals. They would rape women. They would, slaughter and pillage whole villages. And they had no culture. They had no civilization of any kind. They just battled amongst themselves. They had no equilibrium with the landscape, and the land began to develop into a very desolate and destroyed world. They had no morality of any sort. They fought for the fun of it. They pillaged for no reason at all. They were just monstrous forms of life. And this is why God could not allow them to live, so he flooded the earth. This is why Noah was instructed to build an ark and get away from the flood, was because these giants had taken over the land.